The very first video for Chartered 360 is a concept that forms the backbone of all of the world of commerce, not just the subject of financial management. The concept that I will be discussing today is time value of money. Now, there's an old English saying which goes, time is money, and we literally took it quite literally. And the first concept that we are going to talk about is time value of money. Now, it's a very basic expectation, a very basic idea that money has time value. What does that mean? The money today is far more valuable than the amount received tomorrow. I'm sure you must have heard of a bird in hand is worth two in the bush. It takes its base from there. The money that you receive today is far more valuable than the money that you receive tomorrow. To understand the value and to understand the concept of time value of money, I'm going to discuss with you. To begin with, I'm going to discuss with you a concept called simple interest. Now, what is simple interest? What is interest, first of all? Interest is a compensation for using money belonging to someone else. Now, today, imagine that I'm living in a rented apartment. When I'm living in a rented apartment, the landlord asks me to pay rent. I don't have space. I take that space from someone. And what is the compensation I pay for using that space? I pay rent to the person. Similarly, I don't have money, so I borrow money from someone, and the compensation that I pay to use somebody else's money is called interest. So, interest is basically a compensation for a factor of production called capital. I don't have capital. I raise money from someone else, and as compensation for using the money belonging to someone else, I pay him interest. Now, what is simple interest? Simple interest is where interest is charged on the basic principal only. Okay. Simple interest is interest charged on the basic principal amount. On the basic principal amount only. Now, let's understand what do we mean by charged on the basic principal amount only. Okay. So, if I invest 1 lakh in HDFC Bank and the bank pays interest at the rate of 10% per annum. Now, I mean, good luck finding a bank actually that pays you the interest of 10% per annum. If I invest 1 lakh in HDFC Bank and the bank pays the interest of 10% per annum, then after 1 year, I will receive 10,000 as interest. How do I get this 10,000? This is 1 lakh into 10%, that is 10,000. At the end of 1 year, I will receive 10,000 as interest. Now, what I do is the amount of interest that is earned after 1 year, I don't let it remain with the bank. I withdraw that interest. After 1 year, I withdraw the amount of interest that I have received. Now, I do not withdraw the base amount of 1 lakh. Okay. That still remains with the bank. I do not withdraw the base amount of 1 lakh. That amount still remains with the bank and it gets reinvested. This 1 lakh gets reinvested again. Now, in the second year, I again receive interest on the base value of 1 lakh only. What is the amount of interest? Amount of interest, assuming that the rate of interest has not changed, amount of interest is 1 lakh into 10%, that is again 10,000. So, after 2 years, or rather, let me put it this way. So, at the end of second year, I receive 10,000 worth of interest. I withdraw this amount. Maybe I want to spend it for shopping, I want to spend it for whatever purpose, but I do not let it remain in the bank. I withdraw this amount, and 1 lakh again remains invested. So now tell me what has happened by the end of the second year? What has happened by the end of the second year? I have received a total interest of 20,000. How do I arrive at 20,000? 10,000 in year one and 10,000 in year two. And the base principal amount, the base principal has remained at 1 lakh and it has remained invested with the bank. I have not withdrawn this 1 lakh. Okay. I have not withdrawn this 1 lakh. So the amount of interest that I have earned is interest on the principal amount only. The amount of interest that I have earned is interest on the principal, and this interest is known as simple interest. How do I calculate my simple interest? Simple interest is P into N, that is the number of years, into R, whole thing upon 100. How do I calculate my simple interest? P into N into R upon 100. And where P is principal, N is, right now this is period in years, and R. What is R? R is the rate of interest per annum. So if I have to calculate my simple interest for a period of n years, the formula for simple interest is P into N into R upon 100. Simple interest is interest charged on the basic principal amount only. So we are going to look at another kind of interest, which is slightly different as compared to this. That's going to be the second point of our discussion. But to begin with, we understood what is simple interest, which is interest calculated on the basic principal only. And what is interest? Interest is compensation that you pay for using somebody else's money. With that in mind, let's now understand what is the concept of compound interest. The word compound by no means does it mean that this is complicated in any way. All it means is that interest calculation is not going to be a one-step process. Compound interest is interest on interest. Compound interest is interest calculated on interest. So your, and of course, and the basic principle, and of course, the basic principal amount. Let's understand how the idea of compound interest works. Say, for example, I invest 1 lakh in HDFC Bank at the rate of 10% per annum. How much amount will I receive at the end of year one? So I will receive 1 lakh plus 10% of 1 lakh, which is 1 lakh plus 10,000, and that is 1 lakh 10,000. The amount that I receive at the end of year one is 1 lakh 10,000. Now, I do not withdraw this amount from the bank. In the case of simple interest, I had withdrawn that 10,000 and only 1 lakh remained invested with the bank. Now I do not withdraw this amount from the bank and reinvest all of 1 lakh 10,000 for another year. Now, how much money or how much amount will I receive at the end of year two? How much amount will I receive at the end of year two? I will receive 1 lakh 10,000, which was the principal amount invested. At the end of year one, I got 1 lakh 10,000. I reinvested that 1 lakh 10,000 and I will get 10% of 1 lakh 10,000. That is plus 11,000 I will get 1,21,000. So I want you to observe something. I want you to understand how this 1,21,000 came into being. Now 1,21,000 is 1 lakh plus 10,000 plus 11,000. So I earned some interest, and on the remaining, I earned some interest on the principal amount. That principal amount got reinvested, and on that 1,10,000, I again earned some more interest. So when I say 1,21,000, it is essentially 1,10,000 plus 11,000. Now, if I were to break this down, I earned interest on my 1 lakh, and on the additional 10,000, I again earned interest. So uh how does our calculation go from this point? Please try and understand. It's important for me to understand how did I get 11,000. Okay. Now, if you observe, 11,000 is 1,10,000 into 10%. Can I break this down as 1 lakh plus 10,000 into 10%? Can I say again 1 lakh into 10% plus 10,000 into 10%? So this is interest on principal, and this is interest on interest. Okay. So how much does this give me? This gives me 10,000. This gives me 1,000. Now, can I say that 1 lakh is 1 lakh into 10% is interest on principal, and 10,000 into 10% is interest on interest. So compound interest adds up the interest. In simple interest, the interest was calculated only on the principal amount. In compound interest, the interest is calculated on the principal and on the amount of interest. So if I do not withdraw anything at the end of year 2, I will reinvest 1,21,000 at the rate of 10% per annum again. So what is amount received at the end of year 3? Now I need amount received at the end of year 3. It will be 1,21,000 plus 10% of 1,21,000 plus 12,100. I am at 1,33,100. This is my calculation of the amount to be received at the end of the 3rd year. Now, we can keep on doing this all our lives to calculate the amount received at the end of the 5th year, 6th year, 10th year, so on and so forth. But there is a simpler way out. There is a formula which goes something like amount is principal into 1 plus r raised to n, where P is equal to principal, R is rate of interest, in R is rate of interest, and N is the period. What is N? N is your period. So if you want to calculate the amount that you will receive at the end of a particular period of time, and the interest is getting compounded annually, then this is the formula that you have to apply. A is equal to P into 1 plus R raised to N. Now, if you want, we can do a test check whether this formula actually gives us the value that we want. So now amount after 3 years, if 1 lakh is invested at the rate of 10% per annum and interest is compounded annually. The reason I'm mentioning interest is compounded annually is that there could be other frequencies of compounding the interest. We will see that, but not right now. So what is A? A is P, amount is P into 1 plus R raised to N. So how do you calculate that? Principal is 1 lakh into 1 plus R. R is 10% raised to 3. So 1 plus 10% raised to 3. 1.331. So your amount is 133,100, which is, I think, exactly what you got when you went using a step-by-step approach. This kind of interest, where interest is charged on interest, is known as compound interest. The first observation that we did, where interest is charged only on the amount of principal, it is called compound interest. Sorry, it is called simple interest, and this interest is known as compound interest. Now, with this thought in mind, we are going to develop the concept and the idea behind time value of money.